Well, thank you for coming. Sorry I wasn't able to do this a week or two ago. My whole family actually was coughing and had a sore throat, so we thought I better not come to work. Those symptoms today don't seem to go along well. But I'm feeling much better and happy to be able to give you the last update. It's been a few years actually since I've been able to do the traditional town hall, so it's nice to see everybody face to face and talk a little bit about what's going on at the county. And so some of this is a little bit dated, for lack of a better term, only because we haven't talked for a couple of years. But hopefully it gives you a good picture of, I think, where we've been for about the last 18 months, or at least where we've been going. Some of the things that have changed, and probably some changes that you've noticed, or if you haven't, come on over from under that rock and I'll explain to you why some of those changes are happening. And then we'll talk a little bit about how some of those changes impact the 2022-2023 budget, the first biennial budget of the county, and how that might impact you directly, personally in your pocketbook, as well as in the departments and the day-to-day work that you do for the county. So with that, thanks for coming to work today. We're glad that you're here. Thank you for the work that you do for the county. I know sometimes it's thankless, and occasionally maybe a neighbor or jealous brother or something gives you grief about being a county worker, but it's important work. And it is greatly appreciated, so thank you for doing it. So let me talk to you a little bit about this change from county administrator to county executive, because like I said, it's been a couple of years now almost, and I haven't really had a chance to talk to you about it. But there's some important changes that have happened that have resulted in like underlying shifts in how things work. And you probably are noticing some of them, maybe you're not noticing others, and when I say this shift happened and that's why this is going, it might flip a light bulb on and go, oh, okay, that's why. So let me start by saying that basic difference between administrator and executive is really an informal one. And what I mean by that is statutorily, the county administrator job and the county executive are almost identical with two exceptions. One, the obvious one is that the county executive is an elected office. The slightly less obvious one is that the county executive gets to veto things that the board does. That doesn't mean that I get to disallow what they want to do. It only means that if they do something, I have a veto pen that I can change it or completely eliminate it. There's varying degrees of all of those, but those are the basic statutory differences. So the authorities in the statute book are very, very similar. Practically speaking, though, the difference between the two positions is pretty substantial. And what I mean by that is it's mostly informal, but it's really where the two positions get their authority from. And I don't mean statutorily, I mean informally. So the county administrator, when I was in that position, I worked for 26 elected officials. It started out as 30. Up to about 18 months ago was 26. So I really focused on what are those 26 people asking for, where are they trying to take the county, and quite honestly, sometimes it was really more like what are the 20 really focused on, because sometimes the 6 and the 20, the other 20 don't agree, and so I'm focused on what does the majority want to do. As county executive, I think very little about the county board, to be quite honest with you. I spend almost all my time thinking about what do the people of Washington County want, where are we going as a community, and so really what I'm telling you is, as county administrator, I was very, very focused on county government, the business of county government, how does the organization work. Most of you who are in the room who've been here a while remember the vision, mission, values process, and all of the important reforms we did to making county government work better, the business of county government working better. County executive is as much and more about what about the community at large? Where's Washington County, the community, going to be in the year 2050? And so they seem like, it's just one word that's changed, but I can tell you from personal experience in the last 18 months, it's transformationally different. And I think county board supervisors will admit that to you if you ask them. So now we're spending things on everybody's chair, we're spending time on things like this Our Great Community Initiative. And so this is really starting to focus on what I just talked about, looking 30 years down the road. And I won't read to you what all of this stuff says, but Our Great Community is really about what is the community going to look like in the year 2050? And what does it take to bring our kids back to Washington County? And what are the tools that we would put in place if we were about to do that? How do we get different organizations across the entirety of the county, civic groups, churches, schools, businesses, all working together towards whatever those goals are? Those are things that I might have done, or at least helped facilitate doing as county administrator, but never would I have cast a vision like that and actually got to work and start trying to pull those groups together. It just wasn't my job. So there's a big sea change in the way that I spend my time, I communicate, and you probably notice it. I never before would have handed things like this out. I never before would have called a community listening session about an issue that I drafted all of the material on. It would have been driven by the county board. It would have been very county board focused. And I certainly never would spend my time going all around the countryside telling people this is how I think things should be, come follow me. But I'm doing all of that now, and so when you see town hall meetings, you'll probably see differences in what's in the newspaper, at least the way things are framed. Social media presence is certainly much different and bigger, and even things like the county newsletter, they're all utilized now. Tools that sometimes we had before, other times we're really refining them and using them a lot more. It's really about getting communication out to the community as much as anything else. So you remember when I started as county administrator, for those of you who are in the room, I spent a lot of time figuring out how to communicate with 800 employees, how to communicate with 30 county board supervisors who had almost zero communication when I first started. You remember we started things like the weekly update almost 8 years ago. We started things like committee reports and county board reports almost 8 years ago. Those were all communication tools directed specifically at those 26 people or specifically at the 800 people who work for the county. Now we're trying to hit 140,000 people with where we're going for the next 50 years. So that is a 9.5-minute version of the last 18 months. Hopefully you kept up on that. But it leads to important discussion and dialogue about what does our first biennial budget look like. And this is the first major policy document after the changeover from administrator to executive. We had the very first budget, which you've got about, by the time you're elected in April, you've got about 2 months to get going on. So it's very much status quo. This is the first big policy document, and it's also our first biennial budget. And I think the first one in any county or any municipality in the state of Wisconsin. So we're excited for that, but there's a number of things that are in this document that will have a trajectory for the community for the next 30 plus years, and some big changes to talk about. So first of all, when I walk into these, even back to my time as county administrator, there's really 3 things that I was always trying to balance. And of course, I just told you the psychology of that balance has changed over time, but basically there's 3 keys. One is, first and foremost, any government budget is the taxpayers' money. Belongs to them, not to us, county government. So I start with that premise, and I'm trying to balance taxpayer interest first and foremost. Second, it's yes, and we need money to be able to deliver services and keep the lights on and keep the Wi-Fi going and keep your computers running and, right? So that's the second piece. There's got to be a whole lot of capital expense that goes into operating the budget. And these next 2, by the way, are no particular order. Capital expense, and then the last is the human resources to actually do the work. I could have all the capital in the world. Taxpayers are the greatest. I love them. But if there's nobody physically here to do the work, the service delivery drops to nothingness, right? So keeping, not only having people, like yourselves, but keeping people like yourselves and all of the stuff that goes with keeping you here and giving you the education you need to continue to improve in your craft and all the conversations we've had in the past. So those are the three areas where I spend my time focusing on at the beginning of a budget cycle. And so very much from the beginning, that was kind of how our budget process started. So the first big thing that I'm excited to tell you, especially if you live in Washington County, if you don't, I'm sorry, your county stinks. But if you live in Washington County, we have in this budget, both years, $500,000 property tax levy cut. The property tax levy, if you don't remember, is the amount that we collect. The tax rate is the amount you pay. And it's a little third grade math equation, which I can go through with you if you'd like. But anyway, so both years, $500,000 total over the biennium, $1 million. So that's great news for the one of the three, right? The second of the three, there's some major capital investments, the size and type of which we haven't done ever before. The biggest example of that is our radio project, our radio system with the Sheriff's Department. This has big implications for probably more of you than you probably realize. If there's a radio anywhere in any of the work that you do, or somehow the people that get to what you do have been touched by that radio, whether it's a public works truck, or it's a police officer, or it's emergency management, or a dispatcher that is sending someone who eventually comes to you, you're touched by this project. So it's about a $15 million project this time, and it's the type of project where these IT guys make you do all these upgrades about every 10 years or so, 15 at the most. So it's a recurring capital expense, and there's a massive capital spend in the next couple of years. So like we did with our road system, we set out to try and come up with a revenue stream that would be dedicated to that kind of ongoing expense perpetually. And for the first time ever, I'm excited to say we've dedicated $1 million of revenue from now into perpetuity until some future elected official screws it up inevitably, that will keep that fully funded forever. It's great news for everybody in this room, because when you do a major project like that, that means they're not coming around going, okay, where are we gonna get that $1 million from? We're gonna take it from somewhere. Instead, some of you might remember we did a revolving loan fund with Economic Development in Washington County. We're putting $2 million away towards that to fully fund it. It's now fully funded. Half of that $2 million went to that $1 million tax cut I told you about a minute ago. The other half of that $1 million went to that capital funding. So trying to take care of two legs of that three-legged stool that I talked about a moment ago by careful financial planning, which, as many of you in here know, we have been doing for about the last 8 years, kind of thinking ahead. And I've got several more tricks up my sleeve in the next 4 years that we've slowly been planning to basically live within our means and not have to see tax increases or taking from one department to give to another department. Now, what does it mean to you personally in the pocketbook? This compensation plan, or this budget, funds the compensation plan somewhat similar to how we've done it historically, with a couple of caveats. So there's a 2% cost of living budgeted for both years of the biennium. So you can take it to the bank that both in 2022 and in 2023 you'll see a 2% cost of living adjustment. No matter where on the tier system you are, you'll see a 2% cost of living adjustment. There's also an average merit increase budgeted at 2%. And why do I say average? Most of you in this room have been here a long time, so you remember it used to be every year, as long as you had a 3-star or above, you'd move up approximately 2%. In this plan, it's an average of 2%. So based on that 3 to 5, a 5-star might get closer to a 3%, a 3-star might get closer to a 1%, and it'll average out to 2%. We're still working through exactly what that looks like, so don't get too anxious about it. HR's got some work to do in that regard, but generally speaking, it's more merit structured then it is very prescribed, 2% per year. And that's also for both years of the biennium. So we're already funded for 23. So again, you can kind of take that to the bank. You'll get a merit increase of somewhere in between 1 and 3% for 2022 and 2023 on top of the 2% COLAs. Then in 2022 specifically, we're also budgeting, this is one-time money now, we're also budgeting approximately, that's what the little swervy line means, it's not a negative. One of the groups thought that meant we're also taking away 1%. That's a squiggly, approximately 1% line. What that means is we're going to do a one-time equivalent of 1% increase. So for 2022, we did this, you might remember during the compensation plan, where we kind of had that goofy year where we're implementing, and we gave 1% just for that 1 year and then it dropped off. This will be the same thing in the year 2022, and it's possible we'll do it again in 2023. I can't promise that yet, but I can promise it and tell you if the budget passes on November 10th, it will happen in 2022 for sure. That leads me into health insurance, and hopefully you can read those 3 bullets from there. Part of the reason we're doing the 1% non-base, as we're calling it, is because of the changes to health insurance. So if you've been here for a while, like I guess I have, you'll remember when I first started that there were some massive changes to health insurance. I mean, like huge changes to health insurance. We at the county, if you don't know this, and for those of you who do, I'm really sorry to repeat this, but for those of you who are new, we at the county self-fund our health insurance, and when I say we, I mean we all collectively are putting into our health insurance fund, and it's creating essentially a savings account to pay for all of our health insurance costs. And then there's an insurance provider we're paying on top of that for the really expensive stuff. The stuff nobody wants to talk about, like cancers and those types of things. I'll just leave it at that. So back in 2010, 14 when I got here, 2015, we had more of that stuff than anybody would like to talk about. And we've spent down our savings account of this collective fund literally almost down to 0. And so we made some really big changes. Like we used to have an HSA, an HRA, and a PPO plan. We eliminated an HRA and the PPO plan and all put everybody in an HSA. In some cases, people had 0% premiums. Today, well, within the next couple of years, everybody will be at 12.5% premium. So it's nothing that drastic. Okay, but it is significant and it's worth talking about, and I'll show you those in just a second. But you can see here, it's everything and anything that you think of when you think buzzwords, health insurance, deductibles, co-pays, pharmacy changes. There's a little bit of everything that's scattered in there. Before I flip to the next slide, which will give you enough information to whet your appetite and get you thinking, I better read whatever it is that email says from HR about health insurance. Just know that it isn't quite as bad as it was 7 or 8 years ago now. I shouldn't even say it isn't quite as bad. It's nowhere near as bad as it was 7 or 8 years ago. But it's enough that it's got me with holding yellow flags up saying, okay, we really need to, it's been a while. Really, actually, about the last 6 years, we've basically made no substantial changes to health insurance. So not only are we going to make some changes in those 3 categories, but we're also going to hire either a consultant or a full-time employee with our collective health insurance fund to start looking at what are some different ways that we can look at proverbially skinning the cat, if you will. Like there's got to be better ways to save money that aren't really punitive like these 3 things, or worse like some of the stuff we saw 7 or 8 years ago. How do we start really leveraging that cost down over time, kind of like we have been doing with our 6-year financial plan and things like that? I just don't know enough about health insurance to be able to come up with all those ideas, but I'm hopeful that consultant or new employee can really dive into the data and give us some good ideas. So what you're gonna see in the budget, and I'm sure it'll be talked about, I assume it'll be talked about, is that some of our collective health insurance fund savings money is gonna go to fund that position for the 2 years of the biennium, or that consultant. And it's designed to help give us some ideas to drive the cost down over time, okay? So I'll flip to the next slide. For those of you who can read this, I'm gonna give you a second to read it. For those of you who can't, you shouldn't be on our health insurance plan anyway. Oh, I'm just kidding. I'll read it in just a moment.
Sorry.
No, this is a test. You don't understand. Just kidding.
There's no vision in my coverage, sir. I'm sorry.
You get what you pay for. I'll read it. For those, I know there's some who are reading it and think differently than I think, so I'll let them do that. So for those of you who cannot read it, what this is telling you is deductibles are going to increase. For a single, it's going to go from $1,500 to $2,000. So if you're single, $1,500 to $2,000. For a family, it's going to go from $4,000 to $5,500. So there's going to be a lot more detail about all the stuff that comes out probably now in the next few weeks. But when I got this originally, it was about 2 days before the first presentation, and I really wanted to make sure we got it out as quick as we possibly could. Basically just to give you as much possible time as you could get to start funding that HSA that you have. And we can dive into questions about that, but long and short of it is, this is a preview just to get your gears going for whatever planning you personally need to do. And HR will have way more detailed answers to give you on what this all means. Co-insurance, there will be co-insurance on all payments. So currently in 2021, the county pays, or the plan pays 100%, I should say. In the new design, it will be an 80-20 split. When you get past the deductible in particular, I will note there is an out-of-pocket maximum though. So that is to say there's that 80-20 split until you get to, for single, it currently is $1,500, and for an employee, $3,000. For a family, it's $4,000, and it's going to $7,500. So up until, between the deductible and that out-of-pocket maximum, it will now be an 80-20 split. But it's still capped. It doesn't just go on forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. And if you have a $100,000 procedure of some variety, you're going to just keep paying and paying and paying. That's not, it doesn't work that way. It's capped at $7,500 for a family and $3,000 for an employee, okay, per year. The pharmacy is probably the biggest change, but there is a grandfather clause in this. So pharmaceuticals are becoming the single biggest cost to health insurance for many, many organizations. And the reason is the prices are on a trajectory about like that. So this plan will switch us to a different, a nonprofit group that just simply pays, we collectively pay a flat fee to. The current plan has it set up where our broker hires a pharmaceutical group, and then our broker gets a cut from whatever the pharmaceutical gets. So there's this like quid pro quo that's happening. I'm not saying there's any shady business going on. There may or may not be. I don't trust the insurance companies at all. But anyway, this kind of cuts out the middleman, but there are co-pays that are going to go with this. And so whereas today this tier system doesn't exist, Now in the new plan, if you are currently on essentially a name brand pharmaceutical, that's very expensive, if you're on it today, you stay on it. That's the grandfathering provision. But in the future, if you go to the doctor and your doctor says, I've got this really expensive $10,000 a month prescription I need you to be on, there may be a tiered process you have to go through. Basically, try a therapy, try the generic, try everything possible to not pay for that $10,000 per month prescription. So this is becoming a very standard plan for pharmaceuticals, and we quite frankly dragged our feet for really basically the last 5 years to get to it. So again, there'll be a lot more information, but as you can see, the co-pays for that tier 1, I'll just call it a baseline generic drug, is $10, and then it works its way up, 10, 25, 40, 10, 40, 60, and then specialty drugs are higher than that. And that there's also a change. There's also an annual out-of-pocket maximum on pharmacy that's handled differently. The out-of-pocket maximum stays the same. So that's I'm trying to read this to you, but as I said earlier, I can't dive into the details of how health insurance works. HR can do that. But I wanted you to have enough advance notice so you're prepared for what's coming. Now, let me just speak to premiums, because 8 years ago this was a big deal. So after February 28th of 2016, if you were hired after that date, your share of the total premium has been 12.5%. Okay, that's not to say you're, what's the easiest way to say this? That's not to say that the amount you pay doesn't increase year over year. It might. You're just paying 12.5% of whatever the cost is. Okay, that's not going to change for the next couple of years. The amount you pay may go up, but that's because the total cost is going up. So the county's paying more and you're paying more. Okay? If you were hired prior to February 28th of 2016, we all are still working our way up to 12.5%. I believe 2022 will be at 11.5%. 2023 will be at 12%. I'm going off of memory, so forgive me if I'm off by 0.5%. But we're still working our way up. So if you're in that category, your share will go up. So you certainly are going to see an increase in premium cost, and the total cost is also going to go up. The total premium is going up as well. So for those of us who've been here a while, we're going to get kind of a double bump on a hit. Okay. What I'm trying to tell you is the costs are going up. They're all going up. Everything's getting more and more expensive, and we're all sharing that cost. But we're doing two things. We're trying to manage it by spreading the cost across all these different areas, and we're putting money into that future innovation consultant or position to try and figure out how do we reverse the trend as best as possible. Okay, so that was a lot of explanation. Any non-specific questions about health insurance? Really, honestly, I think that was my last slide anyway. So if you have questions about anything, I'm happy to answer those.
I have one.
Please.
The drug plan,
Yeah.
Will that go towards the deductible?
It does go towards the deductible, and the max out of pocket is still the same. But yes, it goes towards the deductible. Tammy.
Anything changing with the cost of using the Quad Med clinic?
Is anything changed with cost of using the Quad Med clinic? No,
Okay.
no. And I was informed after the fact from a semi-similar question, they will still offer certain generics there locally at a much discounted rate.
Will we still get a 90-day supply of medication? I only saw that.
Quad Med specifically?
No, on the chart.
Oh, yeah, you can always still get whatever the market offers for options. It's just your copay costs are going to change somehow. And on specifically how that'll impact the 90-day, you'd have to ask HR. One of the questions, at the last several meetings has been about, relative to Quad Med, are we doing the biometric screening process? The answer is yes. Biometric screening will be same as we've done it historically, with the exception of last year. So if you are single and you do it yourself, the questionnaire and then the pinprick on the thumb with the blood sample, and all that fun stuff, you'll still get the monthly allowance into your HSA. If your family, you and whoever your significant other are, same process. We will not do the double contribution. Let me rephrase that. We are not planning right now on doing the double contribution to the HSA like we did last year for 2021. Not exactly the same as that. So just the single contribution to the HSA like we did in 2020 and 2019, that's planned for 2022 and 2023 as of right now.
So I'm not certain if that's, so that might lead into my question. I don't get health insurance, and last year there was a little, like, wasn't there a little bit of money that was given to people? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah,
So then
yes.
that-
So the question was, what about a person not on health insurance? Last year we got basically the equivalent of an HSA contribution. Yes, that is not happening. As of right now, that is not happening in 2022. The question has forced us to start talking about doing that in 2022, but as of right now, there's no plan to do that. And may not have explained this terribly well last year because we were in the middle of everything. But what was happening last year, the reason for both insured and non-insured in the county to get both was our health insurance savings account was kind of beyond where we want it to be as a group. Basically, at some point, you are putting too much money in your savings account and not driving down your annual costs enough. That had happened about 18 months ago, and then of course, like always happens, a few people got really sick, and so that helped drive that cost down, but that's why we're not necessarily considering it in 2022. Yes?
Has it been looked at, you have the single employee and then family, has it ever been looked at to do employee and spouse or just two? Because the rate for family is more than double, but if it's just two of you,
Yeah.
it's.
We've talked about this for how many years?
As long as I've been here, and I'm pretty sure 150 years before, ever since we became a county. No, I'm teasing. So the question for those listening in TV land was, we have a single plan and a family plan. Can we have a single plus one, basically, right? The answer is, I'm less certain after all of these town halls than I've ever been, and that's because that conversation has been happening since the beginning of time. Let me give you the direct answer as to why we don't do that. The direct answer to why we don't do that is because when you do that, the only people who win are the people who are single plus one. The families pay more, the singles pay more, the singles pay plus one pay a little bit less. So then the whole entire plan actually, unless you increase everybody's costs, the whole entire plan starts to lose money. So that's why we haven't gone that far. Now, I thought there was a bunch of other reasons we didn't do it, like for example, HSA plans don't allow it. I know for a fact I was told that. I have been untold that. Like, haha, just kidding. So I don't know the other reasons. The main reason is it doesn't help everybody today. Now, that being said, part one of the future innovation ideas that I basically said to the HR group is, if we can turn costs around and to start going backwards, which I truly believe we can do because I've seen other organizations do it. I just don't know what those ideas are. If we start getting costs to go backwards and then we switch to that type of a plan and it doesn't cost families more and it doesn't cost singles more, I'm all for it. I just don't want a small group of people switching to something else, and then everybody just pays more because of it. So I think eventually we're going to get there, because nobody before has ever made it that clearly. Like, that's what it's going to take for us to get there. But that's the reason we haven't gone there to this point. We used to have other things that were somewhat similar to that. But once we switched to the HSA, we got rid of all those types of things.
The COLA is January, right, not March?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Good question. You've been here a while. The COLA is January and not March. Yes. So just like ever since the new pay plan, January 1st will be the implementation.
And that's based on reviews from, like, say, last year going.
So the cost of living is going to happen to to everybody, right? No matter what, unless you're below a 3-star. But the merit increase will be based on the evaluations. And what we're working through right now is trying to figure out how small are the groups that we're going to kind of figure out this average from. Because what we don't want to do is we don't want to say, okay, we're going to do an average of everybody, because one evaluator might be significantly different than another one. So we want to try to make it as equitable as possible, have as much fidelity in the system as possible, but still allow for rewarding the higher performers. Other questions?
When are we gonna get the actual information?
For the health insurance plan,
Yeah.
it should be this. Oh, I was going to say this month yet, but pardon.
Before end of day, I was told.
Before end of the day.
Yep, she just wanted
Oh,
this
okay.
meeting to start,
Oh,
and then
wonderful.
send.
Great. Yeah, it's all waiting on me. Sorry. Yeah. So this week. How about that?
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm in economic support, I'm sure you're familiar. So
Yeah.
with like Ozaki, Fond du Lac, WashCo,
Yep.
Walworth. If we're looking at like the cost of things in general,
Yeah.
how come we're not looking at like consolidating like my group of 30 people that really, I'm on a call center all day and doing this from home?
Woo! Shots fired, lady. Shots fired. So.
Time's up, right?
Yeah. I've got 2 words for you. Government sucks. Okay. The real answer to your question is people are scared to talk like that. That's the real answer to your question, because it will expose the inefficiencies and inadequacies of some and highlight the adequacies and competencies of somebody else. That's the true answer. And I know that from having beat my head into a concrete wall for the last 8 years trying to find more and more efficiencies like you're describing.
But it's happening. I mean, like Brown County has remote work. It's like, I mean, you're seeing it. I know you are.
Oh, you're asking for remote work? I thought you were talking about consolidating.
No, yeah, like remote work, like why aren't we
Oh. Nobody, okay, that's a different question. I thought you were asking why aren't we consolidating the consortium into like one group of workers?
Oh, no, I know how that works, but.
Yeah, that's everything I described a moment ago.
Yeah, no.
Counties are consortium remote work.
Remote work, yes. I will refer back to my first answer. So anybody who has IT is sitting up in front. I guarantee you they will back me up on this. Anybody who flipped a switch and went to remote work, there's no way they have figured that out yet. There's all kinds of hiccups, and so I'll give you one example. Everybody's gotten an email in the last 2 weeks from Joel saying we're going to switch all these things like MDM and all this other security stuff. March 13th, 2020, I'm pretty sure that was the date that the world ended, because my son reminds me 15 days to, anyway, that's the day school closed. We'll be gone for 2 weeks. But anyway, anybody who started working remotely from home that day, there was no plan for IT security, for example, for those folks. And for 18 months, a lot of those organizations still haven't figured that stuff out. Those are the types, when I say inadequacies, and inefficiencies, that's kind of stuff, and that's scary. So, will we get to working from home? Yep. We're doing a master plan right now for the entire county campus, looking at like the next 20 years of what our facilities will look like. My goal is to close everything on the south side of Washington and pull it over here eventually. It's not to say it's gonna happen next year, but in the next 10 years, I think it's realistic, 20 years for sure. And it will involve working from home and us getting from here to there. But we're still sending out emails about doing mobile device management and finally setting up security platforms that Dawn's been begging me to do for 8 years. Thought I'd beat you to it. So anyway, so yes, we will get there, but all of those infrastructure pieces that you never see have to be in place first, and I guarantee you some, maybe most is probably safe, don't have that stuff in place. And if you get hacked, it's really bad. And it's happening to everybody. So I'm willing to go there. I mean small conservative, I'm just a little bit too conservative to flip the switch fast. And it's a priority, it's just not the highest priority. Other questions or comments, concerns? Best presentation you've ever seen, thank you. All right, well, thank you again for your time, thank you for working for the county. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.